Well, given your situation with the job stuff and getting new jobs and breaking leases, and it's led all of this has led me to certain conclusions about modern life, especially educated modern life. As the idea was is that you'd be liberated by more education and by more money, and in fact, I believe it's the opposite. I've come to the conclusion that living closer to the bone and being able to get resources whenever you need them and having the skills to get them whenever you need them and carrying nothing on your back, whether it be leases, apartments, ownership of stuff, anything that could tie you down to a place and make you so you weren't mobile, and not able to move when you needed to move or wanted to move. Any of that is enslaving.
Well, the lease is easy. I mean, I've got a lease liability set up on my balance sheet of $4,000. That's how much it takes me to.
Yeah, but you still.
That's how much it takes me to break my lease.
You still have to lose it though.
And so no. So I have a cash out amount, and that's my liquidity position less all contractual cash outs of contractual obligations. So I take the fair value of my car versus what I owe on the car, and actually I'm in an equity position, so I could sell the car right now and actually break even. The lease is a calculation of 1 month prepaid rent, and then basically another month of prepaid rent, which you would do to sweeten any cash out deal with a leasing agent. That would get you out of your lease. So it's actually not a big deal. Now, on the other hand, if you buy a house in Atlanta or you buy a condo, unless you're making a killing, break even is going to be a loss, because let's say you buy a $250,000 condo in Atlanta and you sell it for $250,000. You're going to have $20,000 of closing costs. So that's right there. That's a $20,000 loss. And then you're going to be stuck with it for however long it takes to sell. So a lease is very flexible.
Leases are better. They don't have the attached VIG. They don't have interest to a bank. They don't have any of that stuff.
Well, what if you get a downturn? What if you buy
Exactly.
What if you buy a condo for $300,000 and now it's worth $220,000? You're wiped out.
Exactly.
A lease.
Exactly.
It's totally limited liability. The only thing I would ever buy is land or a house or a mini house that I pay cash for in a cheap area. Like, I'm looking at Knoxville right now, and you can get homes just like you can get in rural Georgia, but Knoxville is rural, just outside the city. So if I were to buy there, for example, I don't think I'd really be stuck with it, because the mortgage on it would be pretty damn small. We're talking $600-700 a month, and that's a good base for the U.S. If you got a decent capital base, you want to live abroad or whatever, and you want a placeholder back in the United States, which I think is a great idea. I know that a lot of people, myself included, thought, you want to cut all ties with the West. But the biggest issue is that coming back to the West, very, very unfriendly. The feeling of being homeless in the West, especially when you're an educated guy, is a very unfriendly, nasty thing. And the ability to just come back into the West and have your property and have your house and just go back into it and not have to worry and to get back on your feet because you're already on your feet and you have a base, that's a huge piece of advice I'd give to any young man. Now, if he's very, very young and he has a great friend and family base, because he maybe still in his mid-20s and crashing with other friends and family is still considered a pretty decent thing to do, especially if he's got a lot of things that he might do that with respect to a respectable future, let's say medical school or law school, that's fine. But if you're in your mid-30s, or Jesus Christ, if you're in your early 40s, you're fucked. If you don't have a footprint in the West when you come back, you're not going to crash with your parents. You're not going to crash with your married friends. You're fucking homeless. You're fucked. If you don't have a capital, you're absolutely fucked. Now you might disagree with me, and I'm saying, okay, people can roll the dice however they want to, but I'm telling you, the older you get, if you don't have your own safety net, if you can't take care of yourself, you're absolutely miserably fucked.
Yes. I mean, the reality is that when you're a 20-year-old and you're living in a certain way on the edge, you're charming and romantic. But if you're 45 years old and you're living that life, you're pathetic, and you're someone who is ostracized by other people.
Yeah. So
They don't want to have anything to do with
the
it.
safety net I recommend to all people. And I know that I know what the arguments are going to be. Oh, property taxes or something, you know. No. But pay cash for land in a home somewhere where it's low maintenance and you can make sure your roof doesn't cave in and that you have security. You can hedge all your bets some way, shape, or form. Maybe even if it's just a fucking cargo container with electric hookup and a goddamn septic system. But having some place to put your feet back on the ground, especially outside of a big, dangerous city that's expensive and full of regulations, especially in a rural area where, you know, you're not going to get nailed for a out of date license tag or whatever, or, you know, just keeping up to date on all.
But that's the thing, though. That's the thing, though, is that if you should be focusing on the rural areas. It's the best value for the work that you're going to put in, and it also is the only opportunity if you're someone who's in their 40s who has nothing and has returned to the West and has nothing and wants to start up. If you're 40 years old, you cannot think you're going to start up in a city and build your way back in a city. That's a young man's occupation who's 20 years old that can do that lifelong struggle to be able to get a footprint in a city and a nice apartment and a nice life there and be able to go to restaurants and bars. That's what 20-year-olds should start doing if they want to do that. But the real best value is the countryside, which is being abandoned. You always want to. I mean, as a trader, as my years of a trader, I always wanted to take the trade that no one wanted to take, because there's value there, and the value right now is the countryside. It's the only value for me. That's
on the one hand, it's been
West Texas.
On the one hand, it's been abandoned, but on the other hand, it could be encroached by the growing exurbia. Looking at Georgia and looking at North Georgia, the growth is astounding.
Well, then you sell out. Then if they do encroach on it, then the property value will go up, and you just sell out and you go somewhere else.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a good.
Yeah,
it's just a good trade.
that would be a brilliant trade. But the worst case scenario is that your property value doesn't go up and your property taxes do.
But who cares? I mean, we're talking about such a low cost property. I'm looking right now at West Texas. And it costs nothing. I mean, this land, they're almost giving it away. And you put a cargo container house there, design it myself, do all the architectural work, truck in the cargo containers. I can do that myself. I can forklift, I can boom crane them and put them together. I'm planning to learn welding, so I can do the welds to put them together. And I mean, it'll be impact fees to connect to the services of the municipality. And beyond that, you're good to go. And if you were to lose that place for some reason, I mean, what did it really cost you? $60,000?
Yeah.
Did it cost you a couple of years of work? I mean, it's not so bad to lose your home for a couple of years of work. What's horrible is to lose your home that you've worked for like 30 years, which is the reality of all those hardworking investment bankers in New York City.
Now there's still work. There's still work for a relatively healthy guy in his 30s or 40s. There's still you can still get land in Alaska and maybe work for one of the refineries. I don't know what the new LNG plant in Alaska has done to the surrounding prices. Maybe it's made it unaffordable. But Alaska is still the best way to go if you really want cheap land. But
I don't know. There's a lot of. I would say Texas has a lot of great cheap places. There are cheap places all across the United States. I think about all these little villages that are being abandoned. You drive. I've driven in my truck through these little towns, and you could buy probably the whole town center for almost nothing. They're giving it away. These are abandoned places, and they're beautiful. You know, all this beautiful brickwork, this old shop fronts that are all been abandoned. I mean, I'm not sure what you'd do there, but it would be very interesting to live there if you could have an occupation where you could support yourself from something else. I mean, for me, trucking, I can do trucking and be based anywhere, so that works. But I imagine all these internet guys, the guys that make money off the internet. I don't understand why they don't want to live in these places. They all want to live in the same shitty, overpriced San Francisco or, uh, those internet spots or Austin. I mean, what the fuck? Why live there?
One of these
I mean, they
guys
could live in a cool place.
One of these guys who was on Rogan's show, I think he was actually one of the more famous comedian type guys. He had some huge spread in an obscure part of upstate New York, like in the Cascade Mountains or something. Sounded
The Catskills.
Catskills or something way upstate New York. It sounded great. It sounded obscure.
There's cheap New York land. That's for sure.
Yeah,
it's a cheap state. Upstate
New York. But having a base, there's a lot to be said for it. The main question is, if you want to have a foreign base, what are your rights? I mean, I was even, looking at Portugal. Apparently, they said, it was old world 15 years ago. Now it's become very encroached, but it still seems very cheap. I mean, Portugal's not a bad place. I mean, you could buy a flat in Portugal. You could buy a house in Portugal still. And
yeah, but the way I look at it is this: like, I really like living in a lot of these foreign countries, but I don't know if I want to make it my base. I could go in there these foreign places and rent something and very cheap and move around, have mobility. Like the only places I really feel comfortable committing to are actually American places, and I can't get outside that fact that this is the country I come from. And I definitely don't want to live in a city, though. I don't want to commit to a city. I want to commit to a secluded place and be a part of some small community. That's the America that I like. But that's an America that I've really never known in my entire life, with the exception of Wisconsin, where my family is from, and I have a strong connection there. So I actually probably think that eventually Wisconsin will be my base, since my family has such a footprint in that place. But in the meantime, since I'm not living there, I'll probably live in Texas and find a community in Texas. Maybe live between Texas and Wisconsin later on in life, and then live a bit in Colombia. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I still think of just how happy Europe is. I know that the argument, well, Europe is socialist. You can't learn anything from socialist Europe. I'm beyond learning things. I just want a nice little garden and a donkey.
No, you want some cured.
I just want cured meats and cheeses, man. I'm ready. I'm there. I'm ready for cured meats and cheeses. I'm ready to just have a fucking cane and sweep my porch. Talk to my neighbors every day.
I mean, look, I think you and I are both. I think we're both. Our youth is now gone. And now we're entering this middle period, and it's dangerous, right? Because we still have power. Now we have all this experience, but the power is diminishing. But we have all this experience, and it's this beautiful time, but it's a dangerous time. You could easily get lackadaisical and perhaps just get into a bad place where you're unproductive. It'd be very easy, especially if you had the resources to do that, and just enjoy the cured meats and cheeses. But the reality is that there's still work to be done, especially the work of the middle period of a man's life. I believe can be the best work of his life. I think that to just retire to Europe or to retire to any of these beautiful places and cured meats and cheeses, it's great, but perhaps 20 or 30 years in the future.
Yeah.
The great work, the greatness perhaps comes as a 40-year-old, 45-year-old.
Do you ever watch? Did you ever watch Anthony Bourdain?
Yeah, that guy killed himself. I like that man very much.
But I was watching him in the hotel this weekend, and he was in France, and he basically he met the chef that created Nouvelle Cuisine. I mean, like the guy at the restaurant, and then he met another. He went to Lyon. Remember Lyon, man?
Oh yeah.
And they said about Lyon exactly what we experienced. They said, yes, it's this industrial place, and most French people understand that it's got the best food, way better than Paris, and that the Lyonnese, just their standards of food and how cheap it is, just you can't it's just a tourist really wouldn't want to go there. You have to really love food and really love France to go to Lyon. So he went to Lyon and he went to this secret men's food club. There's like 40 or 50 of them in the city, and they rent out a restaurant for a whole day. And it's guys, and they wear special aprons, and they have special medals and emblems, and they give out awards, and they have their own songs and their own initiation rites.
It's like the Ku Klux Klan of
It's
food.
like yeah, and it's men only, and he goes there and he eats all this incredible food and drinks all this Bordeaux, the local Bordeaux, and but I remember I had the best meal I ever had in France, the foie gras. What do we have?
Oh well. You should give some context to that because we'd read.
Was
really
it
hard.
cassoulet or foie gras or what or does foie gras have cassoulet or
No.
cassoulet have foie gras?
I know. I remember eating meat, and I remember it was really bloody, and I was really concerned about how much blood I was seeing in the meat. But I didn't know yet that French people, blood in the meat is important. It shows that the meat is not overcooked. But anyway, I remember that it was a Sunday, and we had been told that there were no restaurants that were open. But then we were directed to this one restaurant that was open, and we were the only people in the restaurant.
And there was this young guy. There's this young guy in like a white T-shirt.
I don't remember that part, but I remember the part that the chef, we were eating kind of like in the, maybe inside the restaurant, but the awning was open, so it was kind of open to the outside. We were the only people there. And the chef secretly or surreptitiously wandered out from the kitchen from the back of the restaurant across the street to watch us eating. These Americans who were eating in his restaurant. He wanted to see us eating his food. It was it was a very interesting moment. And he didn't introduce himself, but it was clearly the chef, and he wanted to spy on us eating the thing that he had prepared.
And he probably saw that we were just amazed about what we were eating, that we were looking at everything, picking it apart, just devouring it in quantities that his average customers probably couldn't handle or accommodate.
Well, we also broke one of the cardinal rules of enjoying food at a French restaurant, which is you're supposed to show that you really appreciated a dish. You're not supposed to clean your plate. You're not supposed to finish everything on your plate. You're supposed to leave a little bit of food, just a couple of bites, and that shows that you weren't stuffing yourself, but you were so appreciative of the chef's work. The little tastes are left there on the plate. But you and I, we were cycling so hard, and we were starving and emaciated. So I think we finished everything. No doubt we did.
So there's no way I would have left anything on the plate. I think even when we were given that bouillabaisse in Nice.
Bouillabaisse. The bouillabaisse.
For about 4 to 5 people. We tried to finish that. I think we finished it.
No, everywhere we went, we finished whatever food was left. General, we were so emaciated and starving from the diet of beans and bananas and a liter of milk. Yeah, we were doing like the intermittent fasting diet.
And the beans, bananas, and milk was
everyone.
better than anything we were eating in Patagonia.
Oh yeah, in Patagonia, I lived on an apple and like these cookies with chocolate paste.
Yeah, truck driver cookies, really, really good stuff.
Yeah, I lived on truck driver food. Really, it was gas station food. That's what I lived on. But you know what? When you're cycling that hard, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You can eat anything you want. You're pushing your body to places that it's very dangerous, and you could process anything. You could probably eat dirt, probably eat weeds, be fine. But really the real interesting thing that I've been thinking about lately is the nature of pain and discomfort, and so many people that don't want to choose these things. And we're speaking about right now, like, job stuff and obligations and how painful and the kind of discomfort that's associated with these things. This I would view as discomfort, which is not productive, as opposed to like pain from training hard that builds strength. I mean, do you think you can make an argument that all of the stuff with the interviews you're going through and breaking leases and doing all this kind of stuff, that this is somehow productive in a way, that this will build stamina, this is going to encourage some better future for you,
Well,
physically?
the hope is that I'm aligning what I'm good at with the job that I'm doing, and I'm going to a better place, and I'm working with people that aren't dramatic and aren't political, and so while it's disruptive to have to learn a new gig and to move and all of that, the short term it's very disruptive. In the long term, it would make it so I can do all kinds of other things, and the work is not a distraction. It's not a constant gnawing feeling. Now, there's a risk that it won't be any better. But
I guess the question I always have though is there's this sense in the West of you have to work for things to get them, and delayed gratification, and the delayed gratification, it seems to be more and more delayed for people, and the work entailed for that final gratification seems to be ever more. And I think of like we always talk about hunter-gatherer peoples. Their gratification was always like just walk out into the forest to become gratified. It was always so near and so close, and their skill set allowed for that closeness of gratification. But now it almost feels like the gratification has become ever more distant and ever more requiring of more work, which I think is the definition of a sort of slavery, or getting very close to it. That the gratification may never come, that the pain of finally getting there may involve so many derivative and secondary and tertiary pains that were not even envisioned in the first place, that getting there is perhaps not the reward it was always thought to be.
There is derivative, secondary, and tertiary pain. There's plenty of that. I think that I split my days between derivative, secondary, and tertiary pain. But the easy thing in corporate America will lead to the most pain. I think the easiest decisions, those that are led by short-term gratification and lack of foresight, will lead one into the greatest misery in hell. Whereas choosing the hardest paths and working hard to get out of a difficult situation will lead to better things. I think people that are always willing to leave and are always willing to better themselves and push themselves harder and to break the comfort. A lot of people think, well, when you get one job and you learn it and you're given a good performance review, let's say, but then they, through chaos or some form of torment, things don't go your way. You have to be willing to give up exactly what you fought hard to establish. And I think a lot of people don't want that. They either have families, or they believe that they have social ties to their corporation, or they have a mortgage. They typically have a mortgage. They're tied to their family, and they're tied to schools. So that's the real unfortunate thing, is that today they tend to use the fact that they know people have familial constraints as
But in your opinion, who succeeds best at this corporate game? Who are the successful people that move more quickly towards that final goal, which seems to be the same for everybody?
Well, you gotta start by getting ahead. So, either going to a really good school and getting a top position and then running with it helps a lot. Some of these guys who have military backgrounds seem to really do well. Not really worrying about the effect your decisions have on others. I don't mean to say being very, very destructive, but having something almost Machiavellian helps people a lot. But I always felt that, well, just being a pure technician and being very good at what you do can get you ahead. That's not necessarily the case. There's a certain amount of Machiavellian schematizing, if that's the word, or scheming, or calculated calculated activities along with a technical ability. But the quote unquote leaders, I think they just perhaps have an energy and a zeitgeist, and they can move people in the right direction. But if that's your skill set and you're in a technical field, if you're something of a leader and you're in a technical field, you're going to be fucked. And if you're in a position of leadership and you're a technician, you might be fucked too. So I think it's aligning your personality type and your energy with what you're doing.
So there are roles to be fulfilled, it sounds like, in this corporate world, and people who may be charismatic should not perhaps be in a technical position, and technical people should not be in a position demanding charisma. But at the same time, do you really think that the person who is without any of this Machiavellian scheming and planning and manipulation, do you think that that person, even who is purely technical, in a technical position, will be rewarded for being great at what he does? Or is this I tend to believe that this Machiavellian stuff is expansive all throughout corporate America. And you have this infighting, whether it's between technical people or leadership people, but
the larger the organization, the more there is that political infighting, especially if you're looking at the fact that a lot of these people are cost centers. I mean, if you're a salesman and you've got sales numbers, you're crushing them, you're just going to get a huge commission and you're going to get paid. And you're going to get promoted and it's going to work for you. If you're a CFO and you're killing EBITDA, you're just increasing it, stock's going to go up and you're going to be very well compensated. Same thing with a CEO. For the rest of the organization, it's very, very hard because you're really just a cog in the wheel. Not to sound negative, but you really are. Now, at small organizations, it's much more interesting. That's why I like the smaller organizations. There's a lot less certainty, but they're doing a lot of interesting things. And if you're part of a smaller organization, you get to see all the parts moving, and you have a lot of visibility and you have a lot of flexibility. And it's exciting to see companies grow like that. So that's actually where I'm trying to go right now. That's one potential direction is the smaller company. Tend to work for the large companies.
Is it analogous to like living in a city versus being a part of a small village?
Yes, but I think small companies can move, very, very, very quickly. So there's almost a higher standard. Maybe the standard of sophistication is a little bit lower, but the hustle. But they say that if you like what you're doing, you're not really working. And so, I think some people like the small company because even though they might find themselves working intense and long hours, they see the direct result of their efforts because it's a smaller organization and it's growing, and they see there's just a smaller group of people working. So you see the direct impact of what you're doing on a daily basis. So there's greater satisfaction for working for a smaller company.
Would you say that you enjoy doing what you're doing, or and let me nuance that with the second part of the question, which is, or do you enjoy excelling at what you're doing? Meaning, I think perhaps maybe you understand what I'm trying to say, which is that I think I know you very well and you know me, but if I'm going to do something, and I think if you're going to do something, you're going to try and excel at the highest level, even if it's something you're not interested in.
You can get juice from just excelling at what you're doing, irrespective of whether or not you like what you're doing. I mean,
you might hate it.
You might spend all your time. You might spend all your time
best.
doing something, and you say, "Boy, if I got hit by a bus now, the last 4 years of my life wouldn't be remembered, or I wouldn't want to remember them." I mean, the things I'm most proud of are maybe great explorations, languages I've learned and been able to use, things I've written, maybe my journals or my memoir, philosophy books that I've gotten through and then understood, maybe philosophical aphorisms that I've written. But work in corporate
So
America.
that's all more meaningful than technical accounting. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, technical accounting can be very meaningful if you're making money and it's not making you miserable, and money is going directly in your bank account to finance either purchases of land or the next travels and great explorations, and it's not rooting your mind and your health. So insofar as
But what you're saying though is that technical accounting is not meaningful for you in and of itself.
it's
But
not meaningful for the very organization that writes it. I mean, it is a strange product of various forces. You have a ostensible mandate for the government to help organize financial information or regulate activity and the expression of that activity so as to reduce volatility, fraud, or shenanigans in the financial markets. And then you have these pseudo-private entities that they call the Big Four, who are supposed to interpret and uphold and audit these rules and regulations. And then you have large corporations that are very influential that are interpreting and applying these standards and are held to a very high standard because they publish their financial statements, and short sellers would love to find problems, whether it's through misapplication, fraud, or abuse, and profit off of the misapplication or misstep. So there's a lot of scrutiny.
Look, there's a whole system of factors that seem to be interacting with all this, much bigger than just you, and you don't even know the players and all these things.
Well, I do know the players fairly well, and I've thought about the players, and I'm actually one of the players, and so I don't see all of the different industries, and I don't go to all of the meetings, but I would say that I read the literature as it comes out, and I actually am aware of the debates, and I interact with some of the more powerful people that are involved in its interpretation or perhaps its formulation, and I don't quite understand what runs all of it. It's a result of many different power structures competing, and the result is sometimes a very obscure literature that can only be interpreted by specialists.
Now, I have no doubt that you take great pride in being extremely high level at what you do. I know that for a fact. And to relate this to Anthony Bourdain, for instance, I look at a guy like him who is pursuing something very creative, but within the context of CNN and these larger structures that are entertainment vehicles.
I have no intention of killing
for
myself in the midst
viewers.
of technical accounting, if that's where you're getting. I would like to die.
No.
I'm not a big fan of suicide. I would like to die while taking a great physical risk, either through climbing or perhaps a sea kayak trip or another cycling trip. But
No,
I don't want
I
to die
think-
on I-85 while
No,
driving to
no,
a
no.
technical
I think-
accounting engagement. I do not.
No, I think you're gonna die. I think you're gonna die doing something you shouldn't be doing at your age. You're gonna be an old man. You're gonna attempt something you shouldn't attempt, and it'll kill you.
I want to be like that
people say,
guy,
he's stupid."
that founder of Patagonia, the one who was in 180 South. He tipped over his kayak in
Oh, he hit his head or
no,
something?
no. He froze to
Drowned?
death. He died. He tipped over his kayak. He went in the ice cold water, and he was so old though. I think he was in his mid to late 70s. That although he didn't freeze to death in the water, they never were able to get his body back up to a proper temperature, and he died. Now I don't know if that's just due to improper medical care. It sounds like once they get the guy, they should be able to warm him up, but that's how he died.
Oh, it's hard. I mean, as you know, like when hypothermia sets in, it's really hard to warm up. It's fucking hard. I mean, you could be in great shape and be young and not be able to warm up. It kills you.
That was my biggest
Your body
fear
temperature-
towards the end of my trip, was that my gear was awesome and it was working for me even despite the wind and the rain and the cold. But there were times where I knew the wind was too intense to even get a tent up, and if I ever had a flat, I'd have to change the tire with my bare hands. And if my bare hands froze, then I'd have a really, really hard time warming them up because I wouldn't be able to get my stove together. I wouldn't be able to get my tent up. I'd kind of be this lame motherfucker. Wouldn't be able to really use my brakes, and so there'd be a risk that I'd have to cycle a long period of time while my hands are dying. I'd eventually get to a place
I think of the. Did you ever read the Jack London story?
to build a fire,
Like, I think it's called how. Yeah.
to start a fire, to build a fire.
Like that guy fell through the ice, and he knows that he's got to start the fire, otherwise he's going to die.
And he's with his dog, right?
And the dog watches him trying to start the fire.
Yeah.
Because the dog wants the fire too, but the dog is probably not going to die if there's no fire.
The dog is considering abandoning him.
Yeah, that's the thing. The dog's like, is this man a winner? Is he going to win in this, or is he going to lose? And the dog's like, I need to make a choice here too. I need to evaluate this cat. Is this guy going to make it or not? And well, I won't ruin the story for all the
That's
viewers.
That's the thing about riding it with a group of guys. One thing, and I didn't do this in Patagonia, is you know how they have those hand warmers, those charcoal hand warmers, those little things that you shake up. They're really cheap here. Yeah. Bringing about 15 of those is a necessity for going to Patagonia, because that really solves your issue. That plus a couple of buddies, where one guy who hasn't fucked his hands up or whatever, if one guy or two guys can set up a tent while the injured or the wet or the frozen other guy can kind of just wait for help.
I hate to say it. It might sound homosexual, but if you got a couple of buddies who don't have hypothermia, or even if they do have hypothermia, you all get together in a sleeping bag and hold each other close, and you could probably get the guy's body temperature up and share heat. I mean,
I was thinking more of somebody just getting a stove. What you do is if one guy can just get his gasoline stove out and heat up some water, you put that hot water in a water bottle and you stick the guy in a sleeping bag with that hot water bottle, and he can heat up his feet and his hands. That works pretty well. I'm not sure if I'd rather die of hypothermia or get in a sleeping bag with a stinky guy.
I got hypothermia once. I think I talked about it on one of the earlier podcasts, but I got it in Argentina near the border with Chile, and it was a brutal, cold, windy day that I fought through the whole day. I rode for 15 hours, and I went like 60 kilometers.
Is this where you made the mistake by talking to people in your wet clothes instead of getting in your tent?
Yeah. It was this beautiful location at this volcano.
They think that we're just getting off a bus. They think that everything's fine. They have no idea that the minute we finish, we need to get food in our stomachs, take off our wet clothes, set up our tent. They have no fucking idea what that 1 hour can mean.
It wasn't their fault. It wasn't. These
no, of
French
course they had no.
fault.
They have no way of
drink.
knowing.
I mean, on top of that, the guy and the girl wanted to drink wine with me because they couldn't finish the wine. They were going to.
Oh yeah, even better alcohol. Yes.
So I was dehydrated and I was drinking wine. I was sweaty, and I suddenly realized I was totally fucked. My body temperature had dropped more than I'd ever experienced that. I mean, which is probably a body temperature drop of maybe 2 degrees. But if it gets any worse, you die. You can't recover from that. And the French people left for the border on their little trip, and I was left there at this volcano to die. I was fucked. Oh my God. I knew I was fucked. I immediately set my tent up. I got my sleeping bag out. I changed my clothes. I started boiling water. I was going to make hot tea again and again and again until I could get my temperature up. I jumped in my sleeping bag, but I remember getting in my sleeping bag, drinking tea, and my body temperature was still too low. I felt terrible. I knew I was dying. I knew this could be the end. And there was no one there. There was no one there at this volcano. I was going to be the gringo that was
Chris
found dead at a
McCandless.
volcano.
You're going to do a Chris McCandless.
Exactly. You know what they would all say? John Krakauer would show up, and all the people. The first article written about me was the guy was an idiot. The second article written about me was, he was actually pretty interesting. He did some interesting things in his life. He wrote this stuff. And the third thing would be an award-winning national bestseller for the New York Times, published by John
He
Krakauer.
was 1 hour away.
about
He
a
was
young
1
man.
hour away from not freezing to death. Had
Oh my God! He could have
had
walked
he met
out to the road.
French couple after he had set up his tent and gotten in his warm clothes and had his tea, and then he had
And he
had the
drunk
wine,
one
he would have
less
been
glass of
fine.
wine.
Yeah.
Oh, they would make all these excuses for my death, that he wasn't totally an idiot, but he could have saved himself, and he didn't. But that's the whole fucking point in life, is that you have the honor not to save yourself. You don't want to fucking walk out to the road and wave a truck driver down and say, take me to a hospital. You just want to fucking deal with it, man. And so what if you die? Guess what? McCandless took a picture of himself with the biggest smile on his face ever, and his whole body was probably shivering in contortions from the death that was spreading through him.
Yeah, I had a situation once where there was this horrendous storm approaching me, and I only think I had about 16 or 17 kilometers left, but it was the wind and the rain was going to be unrideable based on the initial pass of a couple of these rain clouds and everything like that, and it got to be pitch black, and I was just absolutely drained of energy because of the wind in the hills. And right as this rainstorm was approaching me, and I realized, and my gear was not good at the time. It wasn't good enough to handle the rainstorm, and then the tent had already been fucked up by some other windstorms, and it was open plains. And not only that, there was barbed wire right on the side of the road, so there wasn't any easy type of shelter to get into. So I envisioned, I said, well, what I'll do is when this rainstorm hits, I'll just get in my tent without putting up the tent. I'll zip up the tent and I'll use it like a bivy sack and hope that works. And I knew that, well, what would eventually happen is just the tent would fill up with water, and then the water would go in my clothes, and then I'd freeze to death and die. And it was what was it called? I called it the fangs of the. It was the Puente del Diablo or something like that. What was it fucking?
This is in Chile?
This is no, it was Argentina. It was Argentina. Okay. And anyway, right as I was just ready to face this guy pulls up, and I wasn't. Like you, I couldn't wave anybody down. I said I was just going to face it. But this guy pulled right as this was just about to happen, and everything was about to go dark. I mean, literally, the sky had gone absolutely dark. This is very similar to the plains of Colorado, where they say if you get caught in such a storm, you have to go in a tunnel or a ditch or just lay on the ground because you're gonna get blown away. This truck pulls off the side of the road, and the guy said, "Hey, you want to throw your bike in the back of my truck?" And I just said, absolutely. Threw my bike in the back of his truck, got in. He had his pregnant wife. She was like 8 months pregnant. And then his daughter, who was about 3, and then me, who smelled terrible. And they gave me all this gum. But then this liter of beer materialized, and he began blasting this music from the campo, this kind of Argentinian country music. And we passed this liter of beer back and forth, and then he opened up another liter of beer, and he's driving like a madman. I guess his wife needs to see a doctor, and it was a pretty quick ride. It was only like 40 minutes in this mountainous territory, and he lets me off. And I try to offer to give him some money, and he refuses. And he pulls out another liter of beer and gives me one more liter of beer as a kind of a souvenir. But that was the one time where I accepted a ride, and I'm not sure what the experience would have been if I would have been able to power through it. If I would have frozen to death, it would have been a disaster. But
It reminds me of a very similar experience that I had. It was in Ecuador, and I was cycling in a very mountainous area, and I,
It was called the
gonna rain,
Cordillero
like you
del
said. It's
Viento.
cold.
It was called the Mountain of Wind. Cordillero del Viento.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
That sounds rough. Well, this place that I was in Ecuador was very mountainous. It was in northern Ecuador in the Andes, and I'd been looking for the last.
How long did you
hour
spend
as I was
cycling in Ecuador?
ascending For
How
What?
long did you spend cycling in Ecuador?
probably a couple of months, maybe in total.
Okay.
Probably a couple months. But I was on the coast, which is quite nice. I really like the food. The ceviche. A lot of people say Peruvian ceviche is really great, and I prefer Ecuadorian ceviche, which is like this soupy broth that they put everything in, and you put like this tartar ketchup like sauce onto it. It's delicious. The Peruvian ceviche does nothing for me. The Ecuadorian on the coast, delicious. There's another dish called camarones al ajillo, which is shrimp in garlic sauce. It's like this creamy garlic sauce. Delicious, delicious. But in any case, this whole adventure was in the mountains, so it was far away from that coastal cuisine. And I was riding, I was ascending. There was dark storm clouds gathering, and I was looking for a place to camp, and there was nowhere to camp. And I eventually stopped on the side of the road, and I was considering putting my tent up on this mountain pass on a viaduct, a tube that was coming out of the mountain. There was a little ledge over like this drop off down the mountain, and I was so exhausted. I was considering putting my tent up there, and I was thinking to myself, if there is somehow or the other like a huge rainstorm, and if water comes out of that viaduct, I'm gonna be washed in my tent off the side of the mountain and die.
You know that happens.
And as I was
that happens to people, and it's happened to not just cyclists, but it's happened to people throughout history. I mean that happens.
Well, this was something I was considering. I was so exhausted. I didn't want to go on any further, and I was considering this very bad decision about camping in front of like a water distribution point, and a rainstorm was coming. And this truck stops on the road. This guy says, "Hey, where are you going? You need a ride." I mean, this is all in Spanish. I said, "Yeah, I'm just trying to get to a hotel, the next town." I knew the town I wanted to get to, but it was the next one. It was so far away. I was going so slowly. It was just a brutal day. And the guy said, "Come on, I live there. And he had a dishwasher or a dryer in the back of his truck that I threw my bike in next to. I guess he repaired that kind of stuff, and he took me there. Actually, the town was called Suscal. It was in the mountains, and
Now, did you have
very
any rain
interesting
gear?
town,
Were you under the impression that Ecuador was very warm?
no, I had rain gear. It was about 5 o'clock at night, and I had about 20 kilometers more to go in brutal
Climbing.
ascending conditions. Yeah, it was just a brutal
That
climb
that
with
could have been
wind,
that could have been 4 or 5
headwind.
hours right there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I knew that. I on my map I had identified like certain towns that were supposed to exist. In those towns, it was just like a little store. That was the town. There was nothing. And Suscal was the next town, really, that I could probably get a place to stay in.
Were any of those little stores open? I mean, could you have said, "Hey, can I just put my tent up in the back of your store," or is it so small that there wasn't even room for that?
It was literally the side of the mountain. There was really nowhere to put a tent up. There was the road and this tiny. I don't know. I mean, I guess I could have camped right in front of a store on the side of the mountain, but I was always pretty careful with my camping situation. I was very concerned about thieves and being hit by trucks or cars. I was always very careful about that. I really wanted to get to Suscal, but I realized that getting to Suscal was pretty much impossible. Anyway, It's interesting though that these there are these good souls who stop at these moments, and these are important situations. They can't be overlooked. It sounds like you had exactly one of the same situations where you were sort of desperate, but you probably weren't. You didn't think you were projecting desperation, but I suppose there's a certain kind of human that realizes implicitly in some very deep way that only they are sensitive to, that here's another human being that could use some assistance. It's interesting how these very non-verbal, non-obvious situations develop.
These Argentinians, though, in the middle of nowhere, were angelically kind. And I know that it's probably different in a big city. If you go to Buenos Aires, people they're probably a lot like typical city people in the United States or in Europe. Not particularly bad or good, but they're trying to hustle and survive in a city. But in these pockets of what you once described the failed state, which is very much the way Argentina was. I don't know if it still is with its new government, but they had experienced decades of really just a lack of industrial encroachment or governmental encroachment, and they were just left to having to deal with their own community and then how they treated strangers. And they treated strangers like close family. And
there's something though that they still maintain the tradition of the traveler's gift, which is that
hospitality
Greek idea.
No, there's a biblical.
But the respect for the risks of that the traveler takes. And in places where the state has failed, where it is dangerous to go down the road, the traveler is someone who's in many ways heroic, perhaps crazy, but also heroic. And the people that aren't able or unwilling to go on those same roads are interested in what the traveler has to offer. That's why there's this hospitality. It's not like a straight gift, that you're giving something to someone and not receiving anything in return. The traveler brings information, news, all sorts of stuff from the outside.
This is only
a noble, beautiful tradition.
This is only possible when people have a certain cadence of life. I think that if, for example, you and I, if we lived in a rural area and we encountered a hiker or a motorcyclist or a cyclist, and obviously they weren't derelicts, no tomfoolery, but we would spend a great deal of time trying to learn their story and putting them up, and of course they'd be on their way. They wouldn't want to just stay there and take advantage of things. But in a city, if I was getting up at 6 a.m. and going on my run and then getting in my car and then driving to work, not only would I not even notice anybody who's traveling, but I'm not sure if I'd have the time or attention span. Of course, I can't imagine some cyclist cycling through Atlanta and then needing.
That's the thing though about small village life where you know everybody. When the foreigner arrives, it's an event. It's an event for everybody. Who is this strange person who's arrived? I think of the I don't think you've read it. I think I sent you the book. It's called Mysteries. It's by Knut Hamsun. It's about this strange fellow named Nagel who arrives in this Norwegian small fishing
you
village.
say it's a beautiful book, but it's just full of misery, isn't it?
No. You're thinking of Hunger. I'm talking about this other one, Mysteries.
Yeah, you sent me Hunger when I was at the end of my rope, and
Hunger's different. Hunger's very hard.
I thought, God, is it the guy who gives his jacket away when he's starving?
But Nagel in Mysteries is sort of an extension of Hunger, but a little different. Nagel presents himself as this really wealthy guy, and he's got this violin case that he takes around with him. But he doesn't have a violin inside the violin case, and he befriends this midget that he makes fun of, but then he also supports. And he seduces this woman that he's not attracted to at all. And there's all these extraordinary events that happen. And then finally Nagel commits suicide in this town and walks off the edge of the pier and drowns himself. it's just this extraordinary book, and it's unclear altogether who Nagel is or was, what he meant, but this little town is infatuated with this foreigner, this strange man, this traveler who arrives on this boat, and what he means. And
how would you feel if you wrote a book
in many
like
ways,
that? I think if you wrote a book like that, because I think that I could see you writing a book like that. If I wrote a book like that, I'd actually be very happy, because writing such a tragic and disturbing book is almost like an exorcism. Because once you've written a book like that, if your life ends up approximating that character, you're fine, because you say, no, I've already created a piece of art. I've already created a work of art that's emblematic of my life, but it's something that everyone is going to remember and everyone is going to think of as tragic and beautiful. I mean, I always got the sense that Kafka was just absolutely miserable. I think I've read pretty much everything major that Kafka has written, but the sense I got was that everybody says, "Oh, Kafka's brilliant." Well, I felt that Kafka was just very much like me and just very unhappy. but he almost had to write. He almost had to write what he wrote.
You're missing one thing, which is the humor of great writers and great thinkers have humor in the face of tragedy. This starts with Aristotle, who wrote in the book his literary
funny things are written by miserable people. The best comedians are one step away from killing themselves.
Yeah, the stand-up comics are ready to die any day. I mean, that's one reason they're so funny, is they don't give a fucking shit at all. They are 1 second away from dying.
They're what they call
that's
raw.
One reason.
Didn't you use that term about 16 podcasts?
I mean,
no. It was podcast 1 with you and Andrea. Raw. They're very raw.
Well,
These
it's true.
Funny people.
It's true though. But the funniest people are the ones that are harboring the deepest pain, and that deep pain though is something that's very truthful, very honest. And I think of a guy like Anthony Bourdain. I knew from the first time I heard that guy talk. I read his first book that guy was a potential suicide. I mean, he was a guy who was on the edge. He was a guy who was a heroin addict. He was a hardworking guy as a chef. He was a literary guy. He had all of the touchstones that lead me to believe that he was a seconds away from shooting himself in the head. Hanging yourself is
the pressure of culinary art, though. Not only are you trying to learn what other people have done, what the greats have done, then mimic it and then better it, but you're doing this real time. I get the sense that chefs don't really have time to go and train. They're trying new shit out real time and then serving it.
Yeah, but he stopped being a chef long ago. I mean, he hasn't been a chef for many years. What he's been has been an entertainer, and I think one of the reasons that you can make money as an entertainer if you live with these dangerous demons that could also slay you at any moment. It could make you wealthy as an entertainer, but the apparatus of entertainment, which is all of the corporate world and all of that you're a part of, does not want to understand those demons or support or help you in any way. They just expect you to continue to produce, and I think that's the danger. I think that's the danger for someone like me. It's a danger. I mean, not that I'm saying I'm an Anthony Bourdain suicide or that you are either, but for people who are immensely creative outside of the corporate environment that they're working in, but this immense creativity allows them to be really good at what they do in that corporate environment. But the corporate environment is going to give short shrift to that source, that wellspring of their abilities. It's only going to want to recognize their productivity for the corporation. But where that comes from is a much deeper place than the corporation can understand. And I think in Bourdain's case, I think in your case, I think in my case, I think in the case of most people that are creative people, they will only fit in to the extent that they are productive for a corporation, and they'll be appreciated at that level.
Do you think that he killed himself because he couldn't step out, that he couldn't just go and wander disappear? Do you think that he felt?
No, I think he got trapped in an environment. He became Anthony Bourdain. He was the being that is what he isn't and isn't what he is. And I think he lost track of the heroin addict Bourdain, the more authentic person that he was in all of this. And I think if he had just perhaps had taken a break from doing shows and doing all this stuff, and stopped trying to be Anthony Bourdain for a while, I mean, he was a very hardworking guy. He was on the road all the time doing this stuff. If he had stopped it for a while and just, because he was into Brazilian jiu-jitsu also, just like stop and do jiu-jitsu for like a couple of years, be a monk, meditate, live healthy and do all that stuff, I think he probably would be alive today. I just think he got caught up in the CNN corporate structure that was using him. It was using his creative and productive parts of him, but it was putting
No,
the
I get it.
wellspring from which those
I'm
things
with
come
all this
in a
interview
terrible
shit,
darkness
man.
and
It's close to distracting me. That's why I want to keep doing the podcasts. I really need to be writing every day. I need to be writing. Just need to. But I need to be competing too.
I look at someone like you. I'm not saying you're a suicide waiting to happen, but I look at someone like you. But there's a certain discomfort and unhappiness, which is not a good discomfort or unhappiness, that arises from the fact that you are very, very good at what you do for these corporations, but the source of that ability is rooted in something that's much bigger than those corporations are taking stock of and admiring you for and saying good things about. They can't understand where that comes from, and that it's an awkward fit in the end, and the awkwardness of it leads to discomfort for you. I'm saying that it's a similar discomfort I think Bourdain felt.
Yeah, I mean, it's derivative, it's secondary and tertiary pain.
But it's the most important. But it's an essential pain. It's something that's right at your being, because you know that like this great wellspring of my creativity, that's only a part of it's being used for these corporate people, and they're appreciating me financially for it. The rest of it is being unacknowledged, and you begin to doubt your own motivations as a man. Like, why am I giving my time and all this hard work?
Well, I mean, there's a great contradiction though with even, let's say, being a philosophy professor, and let's say it was in the great tradition before all this political correct crap. Let's say you could become a professor. I mean, there's a great anxiety about publishing work, right? Wittgenstein, he published some work, but his greatest stuff was in his journals that was uncovered later, or people transcribing his lectures or his talk. But then let's go even further. Let's say that people have realized that academia is just too circumscribing. You could say that even those that truly understand the nature of ecstasy would say that the text itself is limiting, and then publishing, and I think you've understood to a certain point that you got to have something. You got to have something as an outlet, and you've actually published a great deal of stuff, and you've created your covers and your table of contents. Have you felt that there has been a certain pain in actually putting your work into text and then publishing it?
No, I have great fulfillment in doing all of that, from the writing, or whether it's translating, or and then the aesthetic decisions I've made with covers and font. I think all of that is very exciting. It dates back to our days when we were doing the Human Side our little underground paper in high school. Those were the most exciting days. Those were so much fun to do, and I still feel that way with what I'm doing. The one thing that I would not feel comfortable with is the promotional aspects of it. And that's why I don't know if this will ever be, I doubt it will ever be successful in the way of selling copies or, being famous, or, I'm not interested in any of that anyway. I am aware though that the work stands on its own. And when you're comfortable with the work standing on its own, you know you've done really fucking great work. When you know that and you have the ability and you have the experience to know that you've done great work, it doesn't matter the acclaim. You don't need the acclaim of millions. You need the acclaim of like 2 or 3 people who have also done the great work. So I'm more interested in like small village acclaim. Like I want to be the best blacksmith in the village. I don't want to be the best blacksmith in the city. Because I think the best blacksmith in the city is the best blacksmith because he marketed himself as the best blacksmith. He bought more commercial time on the local television station. I'm going to be the best blacksmith in the village. Because the best blacksmith in the village is a really fucking good blacksmith.
Yeah, there's a thing about the city is that even if you're very good at something, I mean you might be number 20 in the city and you're still pretty fucking good. I mean, if you think about
yeah, but you could be number 1, but they might think that you're number 20 because you haven't played the game well enough. I mean, that's more or less my point.
Right, there's a certain marketing aspect of any profession.
Look, Kafka is viewed as a great writer today. Van Gogh is viewed as a great painter today. During their lifetimes, they were completely disregarded. No one gave a shit about them. They couldn't sell a painting. They couldn't sell a book. They couldn't do anything. But I do believe that Van Gogh and Kafka both knew the quality of the work they were doing. That's why they continued. Yes, they were, they felt like they had to continue. It was compulsion. But at the same time, I do believe that they both knew that they were successful. They were successful, and Nietzsche is another guy. Nietzsche was totally disregarded during his life. But he wrote that my writing is for another time. This writing is for future men. And I think Van Gogh was painting for future people. I just don't know that he knew that people would turn his paintings into like T-shirts and posters and pens and market him. He probably would have hated all that. But the reality is that these guys all were well aware of the quality of the work they were doing. And so I have a similar awareness. I know the quality of the work I'm doing. The promotional aspects of it are irrelevant to me. They really are irrelevant. I don't give a shit about that. The whole point in life is to do work that will be immortal, that will last throughout human history, whatever that may mean.
Well, I think that if you're holding yourself to a certain standard and you're realizing that if you're going to cover a certain topic, you better be very careful about even covering that topic, because you first have to compare yourself to all of the greatness that attempted to touch on that very topic. And if you have struggled intimately with those men who have covered that topic, in other words, if you've hypothermically entered the sleeping bag with those men and you're warmed by their spirits, if you've gotten into a sleeping bag with Nietzsche and he has warmed you from the hyperthermic torpor of your upbringing, then
Nietzsche was cupping me from behind, warming my spirit.
No, but that's because the thing is that I can't imagine, you can't have as an aim to be immortal, but I think that you can realize that, look, if you've taken Nietzsche seriously and you realize that you're not going to write one word more than him unless you believe you've got an answer or an addition, or you're at least in the spirit of his work, then you're going to be, if not immortal, at least you're going to be part of that narrative. But
I know for a fact that Wittgenstein, he knew that he had written shit that was going to last forever. He knew it. And he was so proud of it. He wrote it at a little hut in Norway. And he knew it. This is going to last forever. Motherfuckers, you don't understand it. I am ahead of my time. You don't get this shit. You're stupid. You cannot get it. You at Oxford, Bertrand Russell, morons. G.E. Moore, morons. Nietzsche felt the same way. Denied by the beautiful Louis Salome, who would not marry him. He was humbled and reproached by everyone. But he fucking knew he had written shit that was going to last forever. that would have to be responded to in the future. General, I don't know if I've written that shit yet, but I've written a couple things that I
Did
think are
Lou
close.
Salome write
And-
anything that anyone ever read?
No, she was this little butterfly that floated through the lives of all these famous men and enticed them and just distracted them from their work. I mean, she was just this great distraction, you know? She wasn't like a dancer. She wasn't this beautiful dancer who had a talent. What was her fucking talent other than being Lou Salome? I mean, come on. What the fuck? Nietzsche probably could have written another book if it wasn't for her.
Yeah, I just can't remember anybody quoting her or responding to her.
Nah, but I mean, I understand Nietzsche has some sexual proclivities, and I mean, you can't just be working all day in your little mountain retreat doing philosophy. You gotta get off, man. Gotta get off sometime. And he put all his stones in the one basket, and she's like, no, I prefer this other dude. Your mustache, your nausea and headaches are a little too much for me. I mean, Kafka didn't have a better go of it either. Wasn't he like trying to get with a married woman? And she reproached him, and then he got the tuberculosis, and he died. So, General, I mean,
yeah, they all. Jesus Christ.
I suppose we're lucky we're still alive. I mean, we've lived very long lives, perhaps at this point, and the whole point though is if you can get to your 40s and still not have been enslaved by the system and still have physical strength, I believe it's the opportunity to do great fucking work. Because by his 40s, Kafka was dead. Van Gogh was dead. Nietzsche was insane. The only guy that, I mean, I still come back to this guy. I mean, he's the most important guy. Wittgenstein is the most important guy. He's the only one who continued to fight until the very fucking end before the cancer.
How long did Wittgenstein was like in his 50s?
I think he lived to 60 something. And he was still very active and still working. Well, he had that like 10-year period, I think, where he was a school teacher in the Austrian mountains when he believed that he had solved all of the problems of philosophy, and he decided to educate Austrian village children. So that was kind of a decade in which he wasn't doing anything, but then he returned to philosophy. But the most important things that he did happened after that period, and yeah,
What was
still
it?
can't account for them.
Finland. He spent time in Finland, northern Finland.
No, it was in
Norway.
Norway. In that
Norway.
hut.
Yeah,
Norway,
I need
the
to
hut.
cycle through Norway, Finland, and I'll skip Sweden. But Norway and Finland, man.
Well, if you're going to cycle through Norway and Finland, you're going to have to cross Sweden. You can't get to Finland. from Norway
Well,
without
I'll cycle
crossing
through
Sweden.
rural Sweden.
Yeah, but I think most of it is rural. You know, incidentally, I was reading last night. I was speaking with my Colombian wife about my family history and about my great grandfather who came to America because he didn't want to be a blacksmith, and he became an engineer in Wisconsin. And his idea was that he'd get this experience as an engineer in Wisconsin, then he could return to Sweden to be an engineer. But it didn't work out that way. And he ended up staying. And it's interesting that the progeny of this man...
This is your grandfather, or this is
This
your
man-
great-grandfather?
Great-grandfather. I meant great-grandfather. He has 19 patents, steam engines and turbines. And he gave birth to 2 sons, one of which you know, Nils. He's a very fine man, but unacknowledged for his brilliance. Although his brother, Olaf, was a very famous Frank Lloyd Wright influenced architect in the San Francisco Bay Area. but so so incredible, this immigrant traveler experience. And yeah, I don't know what to say about it. I don't really know. This all comes from another time when people didn't know other languages, didn't know English, and you arrived on your own in Ellis Island, and you went through processing, and
There was a lot of
sent
freedom.
off
There was a
and-
lot of freedom in this country. There was very little regulation. You could, in earnest, buy your own land and keep the fruits of your own labor. You weren't regulated.
You know, it's interesting that Knut Hamsun came to the U.S. around the same time as my great grandfather did, and I mean, who knows? I mean, in many ways, they might have crossed paths or known the same people because they were both in the Midwest. They were both in the Chicago area, Wisconsin. I mean, one being Norwegian, one being Swedish, it's not a big difference because they essentially speak the same language. But it's, I don't know, it's just very extraordinary times. I suppose we live in globalization now, which is a transformation of life, the global village, whatever aberration that is, versus real village people interacting who feel so displaced, who are trying to find comfort in something which they don't know yet.
The cabin, the frozen lake, cutting wood. I mean, that's something that you shared with your great grandfather. I mean, that's something that no matter what modern matrix is built that separates people from real experiences. I mean, you can still live in a cabin and cut wood and put it in a stove and catch fish. I mean,
Well,
maybe
what's
that's
interesting
maybe
is
that's
that
the solution, is just returning to such a simple life.
Well, what's interesting is that I fished on the same lake as my great grandfather fished. You know, perhaps pulling fish from the same locations. He had his spots on the lake. I have my spots. Perhaps some of our spots are the same spots. You know, fishermen don't really share their spots. It's very curious. It's very, you know, I don't know. I mean, if there's anything like, like religion, that should be talked about. It's this idea of the lineage that you have with your blood relatives.
You know
But
what's
it's
even
also a
stranger
lineage
though.
of
You know what's even
places.
stranger? I can't remember how long rockfish live, but don't some of the species live for a very long time?
300 years.
So, I mean, it's quite possible that you could actually catch and eat fish from the same school that your great grandfather once caught and ate. That's quite possible.
I mean,
Orange, I hear orange roughy live for 100 years. I didn't realize rockfish live for that long, but
Oh, you remember we pulled some really big rockfish out of off some of those boats. And I remember Gil coming over to me and saying that fish is probably 250 years old. And I because I had never seen a rockfish.
makes me feel
so big.
particularly bad because they're ancient. They have a connection with the past, and then Jesus Christ, they're
Well, you're
they're
not
sold as
supposed to catch
fucking
them,
bycatch.
you know.
What? Oh, you're not?
No, you're not supposed to catch them. No one fishes for them, and because you're not allowed to. They're a protected species. You're not even allowed to catch. I mean, you're allowed a certain percentage of your overall halibut and black cod catch to be
Yeah, it's
rockfish.
bycatch. You're not
You're fishing at the
catching.
same
You're
depth.
not out to catch the rockfish, and it pays shit. It
inevitably,
pays shit.
you're gonna. Well, I remember when I was out on the boat on the Calamar with Lars, the whales ate all of the halibut and black cod that were coming up the long line. But the whales don't eat rockfish because they're too spiny. So it became a problem, right? That we had a hold that would only contain rockfish. Because you're allowed to sell rockfish and to have rockfish on your boat if they're like a small percentage of your catch. It's the bycatch. And since we weren't catching any black cod or halibut because they were all being eaten by the whales, it was becoming a problem on the boat, actually. And that was why one of the reasons we had to continue to keep fishing for like 36 hours. It was just went on and on and on. We were trying to catch anything that would reduce our exposure to all these rockfish that we had.
Yeah, you had the sperm whales eating all your fucking halibut. That's painful, man. Especially the halibut. God, they're big, fucking beautiful fish, and you have to spend all that time setting and pulling, and then you pull up empty canyons, man. God.
Those whales, you know what those whales do to your long line? You know what they do to your... They just destroy it. I had so much work. Oh my God, was I working and untangling line, putting new hooks on. Oh my God, was that work. Jesus, my hands, and Lars, for a new greenhorn deckhand, Lars doesn't slow down. He's bringing the line in as fast as he would for any seasoned deckhand. I'm just expected to do it. Skipper's just like, you didn't get shit. Got to deal with that. I was going as fast as I could for I went on for 36 hours.
Yeah. Fishing is it's a lot hard. It's a lot harder than people think.
You think about things like this. Like, this is a situation where the physical pain is directly related to or any kind of the discomfort and pain is productive. It's something that's
Did you get a decent paycheck for that particular trip?
I got $600 for that week of fishing.
Yeah.
And we caught a little bit. I feel like, and also, I mean, I thought I wasn't going to make any money at all. It seemed like they maybe were being nice to me, gave me money that I shouldn't have gotten because the catch wasn't that good. It was not good. We had some fish, but I also had to get a plane ticket back from Petersburg to Seward. And so that probably cost like $300 at least.
You flew into the Seward airport?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, no, not Seward. Anchorage. I'm sorry. Anchorage. Petersburg to Anchorage. There's no Seward airport. Then I drove Lars's truck down, down the Seward Highway back to
Sterling
Seward.
Highway. Yeah.
That's when I almost had a moose. There was a moose running up the highway in my lane. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
See him all the time, man. Yeah, that would have been embarrassing if you would have actually smashed up his truck.
Yeah.
Those wooden fucking holes, though, they get all swollen and icy, and you got to gaff everything. Jesus Christ, how? Who still fucking has wooden holes, man? Remember those?
Yeah, but you know what? It's interesting though. Like when we speak about the discomfort of modern life, and discomfort that I think is very different. There's all this discomfort in Alaska, but it's toward a goal which is very, 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 very near. The discomfort and the goal are one. It's going to be painful to achieve this thing. But when we speak about like corporate life or these bigger institutions or these cities and stuff like that, there's a discomfort you have from doing your job, but there's a greater, bigger discomfort you have from who you are and the pain you feel within this greater system which is beyond you, which you can't really verbalize or understand, and you don't know where it fits in. And I think that this is a sort of discomfort that destroys men. If they are allowed,
the greatest discomfort is that you're wasting your life. I mean, the greatest discomfort is that I think of Alaska and I think, God, why am I not doing that? Or I think of a bike trip and I say, God, why am I not doing that? Or if I think of, I read some great aphorisms I once wrote and I think, Jesus Christ, why am I not doing that? I hope the answer is that I reached the end of a bike trip and it nearly broke me. Even though it was this great thing, it had to end because I was going to lose my sanity. And I do remember quite distinctly that I had gotten to a certain point philosophically, that I'd reached an end where I literally was going to go crazy if I kept going. I had gone too far pushed my brain too hard, was at the edges of language and intensity, wasn't tending to any, it had no outside physical contact with anybody, pushing myself kind of like what maybe Nietzsche had done. I don't know why he lost his mind or if it was organic or whatever. So I say, well, no, I convinced myself I needed the money, and money was good, and there's a smart way to do it. So that's what I hope. But I begin to get this nostalgia for the writing and mountain climbing and exploration in Alaska. And I hope I just don't do something stupid like quit what I'm doing right now when I'm just about to make my final few years of money and then get back to something else. But then at the same time, could I get stuck in this path I'm on right now? Could corporate success draw me in to my mid-50s where I've just become a corporate guy? I've forgotten. I'm assuming that I could never do that because my spirit would die. I'd always have to mix it with a cycling trip and with writing and reading, and otherwise I'd become a basket case. I would never be able to purely just do corporate work.
But maybe your situation is an easier one than like someone like Anthony Bourdain, who ostensibly probably seemed to be doing the thing he was interested in, which was food and travel and all of that. But he was doing all the things he loved deeply within a context which was very alienating and very corporate.
Oh Jesus! What if I spend all my time writing and I say my writing shit and then I just kill myself?
Well, I suppose
I don't think writing necessarily makes people happy.
No, imagine a university came to you, and the best university with the best people, and came to you and said, we like what you're writing, and we want to give you all this money, and we want you to just be able to do your work here, and we want to leave you alone and all that. But that whole structure of all of that may not be the best situation for you to.
Yeah. What if the apocalypse won't be so bad?
Well, the idea though is that the apocalypse may be a cool time, and the domesticated time of everyone able to pursue their identity is this hell. It's this fucking hell on earth, you know. And the idea of these domesticated cities and all these people living there and being calm and peaceful, that is just a shit show. I tend to believe that that's the case. I much more prefer a bunch of separated, isolated villages where people are emotional and do crazy things, and one village is angry and one village is peaceful and one village is this and that, and all of these dramatic differences, rather than some vast conservative shared viewpoint that globalization is offering. It's garbage, man. It's just garbage. Real diversity is isolation. Real diversity is allowing for all these other opinions and crazinesses to just grow in power, to just be crazier and crazier. That's diversity, man.
Yeah,